number one, start with the exit plan. You don't want to enter any place until you know what the exit plan is. Are there any gotchas, right? If you are going independent to control your own destiny, and then you're hiring a firm like Independent Advisor Alliance or anyone else, you want to understand, are they truly allowing you to leverage your platform, or do they believe that in some senses they are a part of your firm?
Hey everyone, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. Every day I'm speaking with more financial advisors that have an interest in the RIA channel, the flexibility, the technology, the autonomy, the economics. And there's a lot of things to know before you decide to either go out on your own and open up your own RIA, or potentially just plug into someone else's RIA that's already built. So instead of me going over all of that with you, I figured I'd bring on one of the best in the industry. He's a close friend of mine, Robert Russo. He's the CEO of Independent Advisor Alliance and has built a truly impressive RIA where in just 8 years went from almost zero assets to almost $16 billion in assets under supervision. Thank you so much, Robert, for hopping on today.
Yeah, man, it's good to be here. I appreciate it, Corey.
Awesome. But before we get into too deeply, I was just wondering if you could just tell the audience a little bit, about yourself and kind of, how you got where you are today.
Yeah. So I started off as an advisor. I was actually in training during September 11th out in California, and was an advisor from essentially 2001 up until 2014. And started my journey really cutting my teeth at AG Edwards, which now I call AG Wack Fargo, and continued on and came to the independent space as a financial advisor, mostly in the corporate retirement space, but did some retail wealth management, and moved to LPL, the independent broker dealer, on the corporate platform in 2007, May of 2007. And then obviously have evolved into what we are today. So from 2007 till 2014, I was an independent financial advisor in the independent space on the corporate platform, focusing on just my individual clients and my corporate clients.
Awesome. Congratulations on the massive growth.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. And you were part of it. So without getting in too deep of a story, thank you and your fellow mate, Mr. Draper, so in our early days. So appreciate it.
You're making me blush, man. I appreciate it though. It was my pleasure. So, I mean, you've had some of the most rapid growth in the industry in terms of there's so many financial advisors out there that are approaching me on a daily basis and want to recruit and build their own RIA or hybrid RIA. I mean, what do you think gave you, the success that you've had?
Well, I mean, the cop-out answer is people. I mean, we have great people who are doing great things, and I really appreciate, as I started as a one-man shop, you're kind of doing all things, and you have to be willing to hire before you're ready to hire. And quite frankly, you need to hire people that are better than you at those individual areas that you're hiring for. And so I think I had some of the foresight to recognize that I had my own skill set, which really is more kind of strategic thinking, more on the sales side. And there were some other things I needed to do. So I think hiring is very important, and hiring before you're ready is very important. And then just the model in general. I'm a really big believer in what we do here. We're unique compared to a lot of the firms that maybe look like us. And we can probably get into that in a little bit. But the reality is, I'm not a believer in the grid model, the override model, I'm going to take a piece of your success model. And so I know we're going to, again, probably dig into a little bit about that, but I think a real differentiator in the model, and then having people that can help me execute what I believe to be the best model in the business.
So thank you, Robert. So I mentioned it in the beginning of the intro. We're speaking with more financial advisors every single day that are interested in the RIA channel. It's kind of the new, sexy word out there right now. Yeah. And with almost every person that I'm helping explore options, they at least want to explore, a few different RIA options. I mean, in your mind, from someone that's built it themselves, why the RIA model when someone's considering their options?
Yeah, I mean, there's different ways you can go, and we offer 3 different models. So I can say this from a biased perspective. We have the corporate model, the hybrid model, and the RIA model. The RIA model is much more customizable. There's a lot more decisions you make kind of at the localized level, whether that's creating your own tech stack, whether that's just different, vendors and partnerships and service models that you want to incorporate, whether that's your marketing, right? Certain things that you want to do in marketing. But I think what drives the RIA space is the idea of having full control over your own destiny, and making sure that there's really no one that has a bigger say than you do as a business owner. And there are some pros and cons to the RIA model, but I think ultimately that's what it's about: the flexibility, the sense of control, and then the marketing side as well.
Yeah, I speak with financial advisors all the time, and I'll hear it once in a while. Corey, I just want to control my client experience, soup
Yep.
to nuts. Like, I want to be able, if the CRM is broken, to be able to swap that out. If the trading tool or the marketing tool or risk assessment tool that I'm using isn't working for me and my clients, I don't want to have to wait for my broker dealer to swap out those
Yep.
tools. I just want to be able to, to do that myself. So really, for someone that
Yep.
wants to, handle all of those things themselves, if they're going to go out and open up their own, RIA, that's the type of advisor I typically, recommend go that route.
Yeah. Very, very entrepreneurial based. Sometimes whether you're leaving a wirehouse or an independent shop, there's a learning curve, especially if you open up your own RIA. But ultimately, to your point, it's really the control of the vendor, and it's becoming more difficult in some respects because the vendor due diligence that the SEC has rolled out and other things. But it can be done, and again, you're the kind of goes back to that old sales adage, right? You can eat what you kill, and I think the RIA model is a really good example of that in its full entirety.
So when you're talking with financial advisors and helping them kind of weigh the options of, most advisors that I talk to are considering opening their own RIA, or they like the idea of that. Like when is the right time? Like what's the right, asset point? Like, when do you think it starts even making sense?
Well, I'm not a believer in the asset side, right? Like if you hit a threshold, it's something you should do. I think it's a matter of what is in your budget, and what types of things are you trying to leverage, right, within your own RIA. I mean, there's people will say a magical number, you should be 100 million or whatnot. I just don't necessarily agree with that. I think it's more of your belief system. Do you want to spend time being the chief compliance officer, or are you willing to put in a budget where you're hiring somebody that is a 24 or was a CCO somewhere? And so I don't think that has anything to do with the assets. It's where do you want your profitability? And as business owners and salespeople, you have to be really careful about focusing on profitability only. You have to also look at the longevity and the ability for your firm to be successful over the long haul. And so it takes a lot of investment. Again, it's not just the chief compliance officer, it's the vendor due diligence packages, it's recognizing a little bit of a trial and error. You have this technology, you don't like it, you're in a 3-year contract. Do you want to wait those 3 years? Do you want to bolt? So there's a lot of things that go kind of, I think, through that due diligence process. And I just don't think the assets, I think you can have a giant advisor who's 5 billion, that shouldn't be their own RIA because they don't want to sit through an SEC audit, nor do they want to spend their downtime focusing on that. They want to focus solely on the client. And so if I could probably just make one thing very clear, I don't view somebody who owns an RIA any more of a business owner than somebody that utilizes somebody else's RIA. You're just not going to spend time to do the regulatory side well, then don't touch it. Just stay out of it. And it's been very clear with some of the new guidance the SEC has that they want you to treat the RIA different than you treat your clients. And I think if you're in that mindset that you really want to embrace this compliance and regulatory environment, then I think you're fine regardless of your assets as well.
So let's talk about that for a second for someone that kind of has their hands in that all the time. I think a lot of financial advisors, when they look at the RIA, they're like, okay, I'm going to get 100% pass through on my investments from the custodian, or I'm going to get 100% pass through. And I mean, on paper, it looks like you could potentially make a lot more money on the RIA side than you could opening up your own RIA versus attaching yourself to a broker dealer. What are the things to consider there? I guess what I'm asking, like, how much time is $100 million, $200 million team or advisor spending getting their hands dirty with what it takes to run an RIA on an annual basis?
Yeah. Well, first, I'm going to separate a one-person shop versus a two or more shop. So
Okay.
two or more, obviously, you have surveillance, you have other people. Let's just even focus on the one person.
Okay.
You're talking about creating policies and procedures. And I think some of the issues that lie as a one-person shop is you have to create the policies and procedures and you have to follow them. And that sounds easy, but a lot of times advisor brain is more of a relationship driven. We're not overly task oriented. We're not usually following things kind of in that sequence. And so, you really have to view it as, what do you want your day to be? And so for me, if I was a one person shop and I was an advisor, I want to know, okay, when I go ahead and pick a share class in my model portfolios, I want to know that there's a team behind me, that if I pick a share class that's the second best out of 35 share classes on the custodial platform, there's somebody else telling me, no, there's a better share class, because I want to avoid having to rebate those expenses to the client during the SEC audit. And you don't have anyone to blame when it's just you. You can't go to your client and say, is something about the custodial platform? Is this? No, you have to be very aware of all those details. Vendor due diligence. You want to use, you think you brought up the point, you like this CRM, you want to get rid of the CRM. You can pick whatever CRM you want in whether you're plugging in to a firm like ours or you're opening up your own. But if you're opening up your own, you're the one that is now required to do the vendor due diligence. And that is what's becoming more and more difficult based upon the recent SEC guidance on what does that entail, right? What is the risk of your clients being on that CRM in terms of the capability of somebody else accessing that data inappropriately, right? So are you aware of their data centers? Like all of those things that financial advisors typically are not going to want to take the time to do. They're going to have to do, sitting in on webinars about, risk type things. It's not overly sexy. And if an advisor can focus on revenue and outsource some things that take a lot of time but provide no added value to their client, those are things that I think that they should outsource. So in a short answer, a one-person shop opening up their own RIA, it's going to take a lot more time than you think, a lot more money than you think, and ultimately the person who is actually overseeing the RIA is probably not equipped or trained to do so appropriately. So I'm obviously biased, right? So I throw that out there. It can be done, and I know people have done it successfully, and they really enjoy kind of rolling up their sleeves and getting involved with those things, but most advisors just don't.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And me having my own LLC and not having anyone to like even help me with my technology or anything, any independent advisor knows just like some of the ways that you kind of get pulled in one direction or another away from your clients. Even when like your Microsoft Outlook breaks or like your computer breaks or your printer breaks, that could take 3 hours out of your day alone. So never mind layering on top of that, the compliance responsibilities as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you go back and you think about advisors, and having been one, I know the old, Wade say it's like compliance is the anti-sales department, which I understand. But if you go back and you look at all the things that happen in your career compliance wise of things you need to change or whatever it is, I think if we look ourselves in the mirror as advisors, we would say that annoys us. And if nobody was telling us to change it, we wouldn't. Now, extrapolate that out a couple of years. If you wouldn't have made those changes and you were on your own, what are the ramifications, right? We get annoyed to change this disclosure or, I'm going to do the A share at NAV because this person might only own it for 90 days instead of do the institutional share class. I know myself, I trust myself. But if all of that stuff goes on for 5 years and then you're audited, all of that stuff now that you didn't have to change, you probably didn't change. Yeah. And ultimately your business is now in jeopardy, right? And so I think instead of using the compliance and the risk as a way to prevent sales, I think finding a good partner that can help you get to that same spot with a good solution, but definitely don't avoid it because there's a reason that somebody brought it to your attention.
Sure. Robert, why don't you just tell a little bit about why financial advisors, choose Independent Advisor Alliance? Because I feel like it's really relevant to what we were just, talking about, getting the RIA without all of the additional time and effort.
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting. So we work with business owners and, our entire mission is to help business owners execute their vision. So business owners that are financial advisors, we want to help them execute their vision. Their vision is not sitting in an SEC guidance meeting. Their vision is not reviewing share class selection. Their vision is not all of these things. And so when you do a calculation and you have $1 million producer and you start to realize what that person makes per hour, the question is, do you want to spend that hour? Let's say you make an average of $400 an hour. Do you want to spend your hour doing things that you can pay somebody $32,000 a year to do? And you start to be able to map out economically, number one, that you can't recreate what our firm is going to do for you at the same cost. So that's the first thing. And as a business owner, we always appreciate economics. It's usually where the conversation starts.
Sure.
Secondarily, if this is going to be your largest asset that you own, people talk about in other worlds in financial planning, your house or your 401k. Well, quite frankly, if you own an independent practice as an advisor, that's probably worth more than any of the stuff I just talked about.
Sure.
So how do you protect that? You want to protect that with a firm that has the skill set to do so and to help you out, right? And so if you take all the things you don't like and you give them to somebody that's an expert at it and you do it at a cost that's less than what you can recreate on your own, we feel like that's a pretty simple magic that we have. And so where we're unique and where I think we work well with business owners is you can forecast out your costs with us. I mentioned earlier, I'm very much unique in that I don't believe in the grid. And we could do a whole segment on this because I love pushing back on the grid. But the reality is when a firm comes in and says, you're the business owner, but I'm going to take 20% of your revenue, I don't know how much revenue you're going to do. And I don't know how long it's going to take to help you. And I don't know what services you're going to leverage. I just think that model is so antiquated and old. Whereas I know it's going to take me X amount of time, which is time is money. And then I'm going to charge a flat fee. And so for those people out there that might be listening that are getting an 80 or 90% payout, and they went to a firm that said, here are the 13 things we do for you, and you utilize 7 of them, I would highly recommend going back to them and asking for a 50% cut because they're not utilizing 100% of the resources. Yeah. So we are not a firm that has the ability to bring on a new advisor and train them, right? We're not going to solve for that. We're going to solve for an advisor that already knows what they're doing, but is looking for a platform to do it in a very entrepreneurial way and in a very economical way without having to learn kind of all of that stuff that is not going to produce any more revenue.
So just to clarify, $1 million producer, all fee-based business, a flat $32,000 fee. for one advisor, they're at 100% pass through on their business. That equals a 96.8% payout.
Good math. Yep. 90. Yep. And then the only other fee that we have, if you utilize like TAMP work or anything like that, there's no cost. But if you, let's say your rep is PM, meaning you're managing your whole portfolios, that can be about 3 basis points.
Gotcha.
So, if you take all that into account, the question is, could you recreate the infrastructure that we've created on that dollar amount? And even if you could, would you want to? There's, some people look at it and think, oh, it's a crossover, it's really close. But the value given is going to be worth it just from a time perspective.
I think one thing a lot of financial advisors don't know about the RIA channel is once your assets are at a custodian, they're there. And if you ever need to transition again, as long as you're with a firm that's, going to allow you to leave, and obviously you'd vet that out in the beginning, you can transition to another firm or your own RIA, without even repapering your clients. They need to fill out a change of ADV form, but, the client's passwords stay the same. Their technology stays the same. Their data stays the same. So I tell financial advisors all the time, I'm working with a guy right now and he's considering going RIA on his own versus plugging in with someone like you. And a financial advisor can easily, you're not going to like this, but can easily,
I know what you're going to say, and I like it.
I mean, they can easily, work with an IAA for 10 years, build to the critical mass where, they can hire a full-time marketing person. They can hire a full-time compliance person, like hire a technology person, so they can, seamlessly transition over and open up their own RIA, when they're a $5 million team, not when they're a $700,000 trailing 12 revenue team. And in my opinion, that's just the path of least resistance to go, to use somebody's economies of scale to get you where you want to go.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would raise my hand and have that person use me all day long, because what will happen over time is they'll see the value. And, I treat it like advisors treat their clients. Client moves money over, their advisory fee comes out every month or every quarter. And at any point, for any reason, that client can take their account somewhere else. That's how we work. For any reason, at no additional cost, an advisor can leave. And if we're showing you value, you won't leave. And so that's not a concern for us. That's actually an opportunity, because we're very confident in the value we provide. So I would highly recommend folks like that leveraging a model like ours, a firm like ours, someone similar, and really learning, right? Soaking it in and seeing what it takes. And if you see what it takes and you can figure out what it would cost, and then you make the decision to do it, I feel like that's a very educated decision, and a good decision from a business perspective. But if you really think about it, most people, they only open up an RIA once. They've never done it. They have no idea how to do it. And typically the only folks that are going to help them are kind of these off the shelf providers that have really no skin in the game. So yeah, highly recommend. Use somebody for 3, 5, 10 years, whatever it is. If you don't see value and you feel like you can do it yourself, do it.
Awesome. So Robert, I know you just recently rolled out a fee only or RIA only option as well. Can you talk about why a financial advisor would even want to do that?
Yeah, and I can tell you also some myths, I think, which are important, because I think when I talk to people, the original reason that they want to do it ends up not being a reason at all. So for instance, we've got the corporate, the hybrid, and the RIA only model. And a lot of people think the RIA only model is less expensive. And I will let you know right now that that's actually not accurate. If you're hybrid or you're fee only, from an expense perspective, no difference in the end. It's coming out of different places, but ultimately it's going to be the same cost. So you don't do it for cost. You're going to do it because you want to create some sort of a marketing program that is acceptable by the SEC, but is not allowable by FINRA. And so where I think we've really seen this movement, 5 years ago, it used to be there'd be one person that would move, or a team, let's just say, would move from hybrid and they would go RIA only. What we're seeing internally is that's not the case.
Hybrid meaning they have a broker dealer affiliation and an RIA affiliation.
Correct. But now we're not seeing that because the way that the rules have changed is disclosures don't follow the firm, they follow the person. So you could have a team of 3. This is an unusual example, but possible, where you all have the same brand, you're Corey and Associates, where you have one that's on a corporate platform, one that's hybrid, and one that's fee only. 5 years ago, you couldn't. They all had to have the same brand. They all had to pick up and move and be fee only. And the reason I think that is real progress is because now you can have somebody on your team that truly is financial planning only, that does not have an affiliation with the broker dealer. You can have somebody that handles those legacy 529 accounts, those annuities. It can be a junior partner, but you don't need to get rid of those anymore, right? You don't need to. And so I think where the world is now, it's an opportunity that the individual's skill set and purpose can be met in any of the models appropriately. Yeah. And your team doesn't have to be all or nothing. With that being said, if you're a one-person shop and you're making the move and you're thinking about, why do I move from hybrid to the fee-only side? Sometimes it can be based upon the amount of how many custodians do you want? How much reach do you want to allow the broker dealer to have? Do you want them to tell you you can or can't be on a board? Or do you want the RIA to be able to determine that kind of in a more personalized way? Because when you're connected to a BD, like my BD, it's a great BD. It's LPL Financial. They have 20-some thousand advisors, but they're creating policies and procedures for 20,000 people. So they have to be able to surveil it.
Yeah.
We don't have 20,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're approving OBAs, we can be more thoughtful and understanding of specific, unique scenarios rather than just blanket saying no, because it's very difficult to manage exceptions with 20,000. So I think that's going to be one of the elements that folks would like to do fee only, in addition to technology. So some broker dealers won't allow a technology you want to utilize. Sometimes there's good reason for it, and sometimes there's not. So if you want to build your own tech stack, but 2 of the 10 things that you want to utilize is not approved by a broker dealer, then really fee only is your only way to go.
Yeah.
And that's probably the biggest reason that I see people end up moving is, again, if a BD is going to approve a technology, it's for 20,000 people, and it could be a 3 to 5 year timeline from when that technology is introduced. Yeah. And you're, as a business owner, you're like, I've got, 5% of my business is legacy 529, and I really want to use this technology to help me grow. Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with the technology. It passes all the due diligence. It's just not approved by the BD. Yeah, that's a great opportunity to break away.
Yeah, I've noticed compliance flexibility is a really big one. I think a lot of financial advisors don't know there's a really big difference between what the SEC and FINRA says you can do and what a firm of 5,000, 10,000, 15, 20,000, how they interpret it and are comfortable monitoring across all those people. So typically being part of a smaller firm, you get a little bit more flexibility and leeway while still very much following the rules.
Yeah, you look at our team, we've got 25 people, and we have each individual firm has a dedicated compliance analyst. So we have a question or they have a question, it's a phone call, they know, right? It's Chris, it's Derek, it's Nate, it's Jessica, whoever it is, it's Pat. The problem is when you start to create rules where there's not direct communication and interaction, you have to be very black and white. This is allowed or it's not. It's not really open to discussion or in understanding. And so, we have the ability at our size in order to do that. You have to have some really, really good infrastructure behind that one compliance analyst, which I believe that we do. But yeah, most broker dealers, they're not bringing on a technology, or they're not bringing on these unique scenarios because they can't possibly surveil all of them out there.
Awesome. That's super helpful. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Robert, I've noticed and seen a few headlines recently. You've been getting into the mergers and acquisitions game a little bit, and have turned into
Yeah.
an investor in some, financial advisors practices. I guess, what have you been seeing out there from that standpoint? Or, another question, I mean, what are you looking for in a financial advisor's practice to acquire their practice? Like, what's going to be the most attractive and the best valuation from you?
Yeah, it's a good question. We have been a little bit more on the M&A side. We have a great director of mergers and acquisitions in Kyle Campbell. And then, Steve Gensler, who's our strategic solutions person. And between those two, we're pretty lights out in that area. We did take a 20% stake in a relatively large firm, over 600 million in assets, out of Arkansas. Great people, Gen Wealth. We have purchased 3 businesses already this quarter, of advisors that were fully getting out. And so we need to provide an opportunity for our advisors' life cycle, is the reason we created it. So they come over from a firm, right? And they're building, they're growing. And at some point, they may be looking to kind of sunset out, or they may be looking to totally get out. We don't want them to have to move platforms to do it, because when you move platforms, you lose value. And so when we're recruiting, one of our opportunities is, hey, when you get on here, we'll be able to give you a better than market payment, because the risk of us purchasing a stake is so low, because the clients aren't gone anywhere.
Yeah.
Right. They're staying as is, and there's no paperwork. There's really not a paperwork, because the assets are owned by the RIA at the end of the day. And so who we're looking for, obviously, we're looking for folks that have a clean compliance record. We're looking for folks that have a very vanilla business model, right? We want people that are really driving it at the financial planning and relationship level, and are comfortable with outsourcing. And the reason for that, the hardest people to purchase in any way or partner with are people that really do a lot of things inside of their office on their own. Because when they leave and they're no longer there, we have to change the experience for the client. So we're looking for advisors that are very high level financial planning, and then leveraging outsourcing investments, outsourcing maybe, any insurance, all of those things. Because at this point, we're not having to change any of those items. We're just needing to change that relationship management component. So the folks that say, hey, I would really like an opportunity for you to bid on my business, probably aren't the folks, because they're usually the folks that are running their own unique portfolios. And clients not going to want our portfolios, because they're used to Joe's. They've been running them for 20 years. That's a difficult purchase.
So really quick, Robert, because I just think it's really important. I speak with a lot of financial advisors that say, like, Corey, I'm not ready to sell my business and go away. And I think a lot of financial advisors think, that's what it is. You sell your business, you stick around for 2 or 3 years to incorporate the clients with a new buyer, and then you leave. And the minority sale has been around for a while, but it started to get really popular, over the last couple of years. So can you just talk about like what that even means?
Yeah. So, and it became popular because, big players got into the space, right? Private equity decided, that they would get into the space. And therefore it kind of forced a lot of firms to kind of learn and kind of get up to speed on it. But, the way that a lot of the minority deals work, you're really not buying a business as much as the buying the right to the future revenue. And so what that means is, when you're purchasing a minority stake, you're not necessarily changing somebody from a 1099 to a W-2. the advisors might say, look, I would just really like a partner I want to take some chips off the table. You know, I've got a long runway still to go, but man, I would just feel less stressful if I could take 20% of my business at a 5x multiple and put it in the bank. God forbid something ever happens. They just know they've got that done.
Mm-hmm.
But then they have to weigh, if somebody's to buy 20%, can that company help you grow 20%?
Yeah.
And so the hope there is, if we were to purchase a 20% stake, you know, our goal is to increase their revenue by 20% in some capacity that we can help them.
Yep.
So that they wouldn't necessarily feel a reduced income, but they would still have received an upfront payment.
Sure.
And so they can decide what to do with that payment. That sometimes can accelerate their growth, and that's great. But it also can just alleviate some stress. And you know, a lot of our business owners, you know, they use that money for other things. You know, maybe it's buying a property or something that maybe 10 years they'll build on, or you know, those sorts of things. So very, very unique. But I think that 20%, it's really, I think 25% is a rule where once you purchase more than 25%, it creates a little bit more complexity. So you usually either see that 25 or less, or the full 100. You don't usually see anything in between.
Well, it's really interesting. I mean, I've talked to financial advisors about this solution, another real life scenario. There's so many teams where there's an older founder of the firm. He's 60 years old. He maybe has 2 or 3 younger guys, and some practices just get too big to sell sometimes, where the younger people are just starting out in their career. They don't have the capital to be able to buy that themselves, or they're uncomfortable putting a multi-million-dollar liability on their balance sheet. And in this scenario, you know, a financial advisor has the ability to, you know, manage their risk, take some of their chips off the table, like you said, and still pass, you know, an independent practice that they still own partially down to the, you know, people that they care about.
Yeah. And we actually have a deal right now, an internal one, where, you know, we're acting almost as not a broker of the deal, but as that junior advisor who hasn't really developed enough to purchase it, where we will actually work with that junior as a joint partner, where we are actually providing the capital and then reducing the payout for a period of time, and then it goes up. And so they're not really ever paying $1. We're paying the dollar, and we're buying a 7-year revenue stream that we don't think we could invest our money and get elsewhere. And then after that 7 years, that advisor now owns that book of business, and they never had any outlay because we're just receiving that income for the 7-year time frame. So you can be really creative, and I think if you have willing partners that have capital, you typically are going to be able to find a customizable solution that works for all parties.
There's solutions out there for everyone coming out every day. It's just so exciting.
It is. I have the whiteboard. You know, this is like where the magic happens, and you know, everybody wants to know, like, what will you pay for my business? Or I don't know anything about your business, right? And so it shouldn't be this team versus that team. The only way good deals happen is if you know, everybody is compromising, because so many things can go wrong with a deal that there can never be a winner. If there's a winner and a loser, it's a problem. It needs to be a win-win from the start all the way through to the end.
Absolutely. Robert, is there anything else you want to say to, you know, financial advisors out there that are, you know, potentially, you know, considering their options?
Yeah. I mean, again, this comes from a place of bias, but you know, number one, start with the exit plan. You don't want to enter any place until you know what the exit plan is. Are there any gotchas, right? If you are going independent to control your own destiny, and then you're hiring a firm like Independent Advisor Alliance or anyone else, you want to understand, are they truly allowing you to leverage your platform, or do they believe that in some senses they are a part of your firm? And I think that's important. So know what the exit is. You know, we talk about it all the time. Divorces at 50% divorce rate's 50%, and you love that person. And in business, it's all about money. You don't always love the person. And there's a reason there's breaking things apart is pretty common. So know what that looks like in advance. And then my biggest probably the thing that kind of irks me a little bit is when people talk about infrastructure is the real estate play. Don't view real estate as part of an ongoing service. View it as a transactional moment in time. Don't mortgage your future for a deal that you would be knowledgeable enough in 12 months to do. So anytime you work with a real estate deal where it's part of some sort of a payout, if you look at another firm, make sure there's some sort of a call or put option that after 1 year, you can take over that lease and move there. So the work up front is a lot and it should be charged, but it shouldn't come out of future revenue because it's not related.
That's awesome, Robert. I really appreciate it. I'm so happy to see your continued success, and I can't wait to see what the next 5 or 10 years brings.
The next time we do one of these, we'll do it over a cheesesteak.
I love that. I love that.
All right, Corey, tell your wife I say hello.
Will do. See ya.
All right, see you, man.